YouTube, Awesome Rider here. In today's video, I'm going to be ranking all of the Kamen Rider gimmicks so far. If you don't know what I know by gimmicks, leave this video. You're too stupid to be here. No, I'm just kidding. But you know, the gimmicks are the little trinket items or cards or bottles or memories or whatever they use to transform that facilitates the transformation and the weapons and the collectible gimmick throughout the year that became, I think, most prominent after Decade. I think Decade sort of pseudo kicked it off with the cards. I mean, we obviously had cards before, but when it became more of a prominent thing, and I think Double really, the second wave Heisei era, really kicked it off as being a regular thing. Because it's funny, because there are a couple from the early era, but it really became more regular after that. So let's go ahead and get started. Coming in at the bottom of the list for me is Astro Switches. Now, I don't hate the Astro Switches or anything like that. They just never clicked with me, or never switched with me or anything like that. I appreciated them for what they were. I liked the way they worked in terms of the show, like giving them the different armament pieces and stuff, and there were some ones that were fun to click and stuff, and there was some creativity there, but I don't know, they just never were my cup of tea, and just a lot about the storyline surrounding them felt like a weird just mirror of Gaia memories. It was the one year I skipped back when I actually regularly covered Rider. In fact, I only have 2 Switches. I thought I only had one, which was the one that came with the O Metal set, but then I just realized recently that I have one that came with the burger meal I bought. Not like a literal burger meal like at McDonald's or something, but like the Candroid, Food Droid. Anyway, they're just not my favorite. It's not a list where it's like, this is at the bottom because I hate it. They just never clicked with me. After that is Flessels, which were kind of like the pre-gimmick. Like, DK kickstarted it, Kiva tested the waters with something outside of cards. And this one I struggled with because I like the idea of them. They're not like, oh my god, I love these designs, but I have a soft spot for Kiva. I think the designs are kind of slick for the Kiva ones in particular, and I think the idea behind it was fun. You know, like the idea of it being a whistle, and you know, because the belt for most of them is a living creature that can blow the whistle. I think that was a lot of fun. The only reason it's lower on the list is because it was just kind of like a prototype idea. Like, it didn't really get more outside of the ones that came with the belt, which in a way is kind of nice. It's kind of nice that if you picked up the belt you wanted, you had all the Flessels you needed, and you didn't have to hunt down a set or a magazine or whatever. I think there was probably some magazine promotions, but you know what I mean. Nowadays, you have to buy different sets or individuals, or you probably have to buy a weapon to get one, and for the most part, outside of, I think, the Zambat sword came with the Flessel, you had everything you needed. But it was just kind of like a halfway point where I could see them revisiting this and it being more robust, and maybe some more creative ones, like, you know, later on with the gimmicks, you get to farther in and they'll have ones that are more than just the initial ones, like the full bottles doing like the Pepsi can and stuff like that. So yeah, I liked the idea of it, and I have a soft spot for Kiva, so I had to rank it a little bit higher. After that on the list is full bottles. I really do love the build series, and I love the way that these gimmick work. I love the way that this gimmick works in the series in regards to the nebula gas, how it all ties to the mythology. And you know, they don't look half bad. There are some cool ones in person. It's kind of one of those ones that seems boring and you get a couple to collect and I'm like, oh, these are actually pretty neat. But after a while, they're kind of one of the more boring ones to collect. The main things I like about them, again, are the mythology and some of the more creative ways that they use them later, like with, mainly like Rabbit Tank Sparking and Genius Bottle, using different types of bottles. I guess the Rabbit Tank one, but that one was like notorious for going off. Like, it would be like in my room or something, or in a backpack, and someone would sneeze and it would start going off. But this one had some creative use of stuff later, but I still found it to be one of the more boring gimmicks. Following that up with Wizard Rings. Wizard Rings are kind of a mixed bag because I really do like, again, I like the idea of these. I think it's a lot of fun. But it's kind of like I like half of them and don't like the other half. Like, I really like the transformation related ones. Like, it's a little silly. It looks like you're just wearing a giant head on your finger. Like, it's almost like if Gosei designed them. But they look probably the coolest and the most jewel-like and capture that jewel-like design of Wizard's helmet. But then, like, all the ability ones and stuff like that are just kind of boring. So it's kind of this midway point where I really like some of them, but the other half are a little bit boring. And I don't know. This just felt like the right placement on the list for me. Following that up with icons. Icons are really strange. I think the idea and the design really work for a spooky vibe. Unfortunately, they don't really go all in on the spooky vibe. Instead, go more all in on this weird dimension with these alien-like icon things. But I appreciate their design for thinking it was going to be a more spooky series, and I think that they look pretty good. Kind of reminds me of Bottles in a way, and not in the sense that I did like icons better design-wise when I first saw them, but in terms of when you have a couple of them, you're like, oh, I actually kind of like these, like for your display or whatever. But after you collect a bunch of them, it just gets kind of boring. There was a couple creative uses down the line, but I don't know. Icons, I think, kind of represent a lot of missed potential, just like the show itself. Then is actually the Geats buckles. Now, also, I don't know, I guess you could count a secondary gimmick being the ID cores. I didn't count it for this list, I just counted the main buckles. Now this was one coming from the outside when I hadn't really checked out Geats yet, because I did not check out Geats when it first came out, that I thought they seemed kind of boring. Like the designs were fine, but they seemed kind of clunky and nothing really caught my eye at all. And that's still true to a degree. There's not really any of the buckles, or very many of them at least, that I would think, oh, I really want that. Like even if I wasn't collecting the belt, that it's just a cool design or something. Like they are a little bit boring, but having watched the show and actually picked up the driver because I liked Geats so much, they're actually surprisingly fun. Like the way they function and can have different types of functions and mechanisms, like the lottery one and stuff like that. Just the way that the powers work. It's still not my favorite, but I appreciated it a lot more. There was a lot more creative stuff going on with it, a lot more fun than I thought. Some cool designs that can come out of it, like the Bujin one. So yeah, this was one that I definitely appreciated more as time went on. Following that up with just cards. This is a gimmick that they've used for multiple different series, and this is like an easy, likable gimmick, because so many people, especially people that like Toku, there's a lot of crossover with those of us that maybe collected cards. So it's a fun one because you're able to add to your roster of sounds and whatnot, but you also might be able to have a cool binder of cards that you can collect if you're into that sort of thing. And that's just kind of an easy one to like. You know, I've liked some of the cards more than others. I think some of them leaned on the card gimmick more than others. I feel like Gachard probably leaned on it the most. If I had to rank them, it would probably be Ryuki. Like, I like the Ryuki designs. You know, they basically just have the designs of the monsters and the weapons on them, though. Like, I think they work fine. And probably Gachard, just like, even though I didn't like the series, I really did like the designs of the Chemis, and I thought it was fun to see the designs they came up with. Then Decades, just because Decades was a lot of fun, just seeing the different riders, you know, and their forms and their abilities, and that was probably the most I'd gotten excited by it because it was more of a collectible gimmick. But probably number one for me is Blades, just because I love how it tied it in them feeling like actual playing cards, and they had this very royal feel to them that made them stand out. But yeah, that's like my little mini ranking of the cards we've gotten. Following that up with Vice Stamps. Vice Stamps were ones that I appreciated the idea, and like kind of like full bottles, but like even more so when I got them in person, I appreciated them even more because they do actually look pretty cool. They're very colorful. They look very professional, if that makes any sense. Like, they don't look very cheap. I mean, they're very bright and colorful, but they don't feel like cheapo toys, if that makes any sense. Like, they make really good display pieces, and the vibrant designs of the creatures look really good. I think it's a very fun, creative gimmick for an electronic gimmick, the way it's used, especially with like the way it stamps on the belt and leaves its impression. There wasn't as many creative like choices for the power-up ones and stuff like that, and the sounds were kind of a mixed bag of ones I really liked and really annoyed me, and they certainly got really annoying later in the series when everyone would transform together and it sounds like an assembly trying to argue over each other. But I still really did enjoy these more, and as I watched the series more, I appreciated them more. After that was one that, like, again, I started lower on the list because I started this list early in its run, but rose higher, having seen now around 10-ish episodes of it, is the Gochizo from Gachard. Like, Gachard, wow. That's a disgrace. I can't believe I just said that. The Gochizo from Gav. Like, I even picked up this little one that came with that little card just because I wanted one. Like, even when I don't collect Rider, I always like to have one gimmick from it. And it's really tempted me to buy more of these. Like, they're just generally adorable. And I think they're much more successful at being memorable and unique compared to the Chemis. I think that they serve their purpose well in the show. I think they do a good job of, like, treading some familiar territory, but also feeling like their own unique thing. And honestly, just, they're so much fun, and they have a lot of personality, and they're probably one of my favorite non-electronic gimmicks, because usually the non-electronic ones can get boring after a while because they don't really do anything, but because these guys have their own individual little personalities, it just makes them all that much more fun. So they might even raise up higher in the ranks. I would be shocked if I didn't cave and pick up something else from this, but I've really been loving these guys so far. Next up is Shift Cars. I think this was a fun one because it can almost duel as like collecting Hot Wheels in a way. Like, obviously they don't exactly feel like Hot Wheels, like a die-cast or anything like that, but it's kind of neat because if you do like stuff like that, a lot of them had a cool designs and personality. We had some cool Legend Rider ones, so I think it was cool that it could kind of scratch that itch of like collecting these cool different cars, but it also functioned as the gimmick, and I kind of liked the way they worked too, where you flipped it around and kind of switched it on, and I don't know, I thought this was just a fun little gimmick. After that is Wonder Ride books. I think this was a really underrated gimmick. I think there was some really fun stuff there. Like, I just love the way that they had like the henshin where they would fold over each other and create images. Some of the later ones, you know, if even though they're clunky like a lot of them, some of the later gimmicks for like the power-ups and stuff had some really fun creative stuff. I just think it was a really fun creative idea to have these little books with the stories contained with them, and just the way they looked, the sounds, and the way they could work with each other, and the way they built upon it. Like, that was one of the things that was definitely a positive for me when I went through Saber, was I'm like, there's some really cool stuff here with this gimmick, especially the way it works too with like a sword changer. Like, I don't know, I really liked them. After that is Ride Watches. You know, very mixed feelings about the Geo series, but Ride Watches were a really cool anniversary gimmick. You know, the sounds, I do like the sounds. I wish I liked them a little bit more, but I do like the sounds of them. But just in general, they make a really cool collectible display piece if you're into that, you know, and you have a wide variety with riders in different forms, and the role they play in the story is very cool. I really like the way that works. And then of course you have the Another Rider version of them. I think that this was a really fun gimmick, and they also had some pretty cool like later ones with like Geo 2's Ride Watch and Grand Geo that were a lot of fun as well. This was definitely a strong point in them designing Geo as an anniversary series. Oh, I ended up with Progrise Keys. Even though I'm not the biggest fan of 01, I really do enjoy the Progrise Keys. I think that they're very slick and futuristic looking, and yet also look kind of like a cassette tape, which I just found to be kind of fun because it gave it this modern retro aesthetic, kind of maybe accidentally. And I just liked the design too, like the simplistic kind of slick design of the creatures that they would put on the front, and I also love the voice and sounds for these. So despite the fact that I'm not the biggest fan of the series, I've always really liked this gimmick. Next up is Gashats. You know, obviously being a big video game fan, this one hit a lot of buttons for me, pun intended. And these work really well. You know, the designs look more like weird little lollipops, but the designs have a lot of personality. You know, getting to see kind of effectively what the video game cartridge design would be was a lot of fun. I really loved the sounds and the jingles for this. I think they had some pretty fun and creative ways of using them with the later power-ups. It was one that I actually didn't collect that much of, but I really did appreciate a lot. We got the top three. Now, number three, despite me talking about how non-electronic gimmicks usually aren't as exciting, is O-Metals. There's a bit of nostalgia going on for this one, back for the RR podcast days and the early days of the channel, and trying your best to get the Puto Tira metal set from the 4 that CS Toys got in stock. But I really did like these. You know, I think that they were fun to collect because it kind of had a coin collecting vibe. The metals had this sort of ancient feel to them. I just really liked the designs of them. So it was one of the very few non-electronic collectibles that I still really like. And I love the designs for all the core metals. And you also had like the Legend Rider metals, and it was just a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to collect, and they're still a collectible that I hold like a special place in my heart for. Runner-up is Gaia Memories. I think these are just a fantastic template for the core idea of a gimmick. I mean, even though I think the ones like the O-Metals and currently the Gochizo I think can work, I think a rider gimmick is at its best when it does have an electronic, because I think it adds a little bit more playability when you can play with it on its own, or if maybe you're saving up or can't afford it, you can maybe buy 1 or 2 of them and play with them without having to have a driver, and it just feels like you're getting a little bit more bang for your buck, and it makes it a little bit more fun. And this was such a genius idea, the way they work together, the different varieties you could have with the 2 different sides, and then of course you have the Dopant memories. Memories also had really cool legend ones that almost acted like a little mini demo for like the henshin sequences for the characters, or for some of the lines for characters like Momotaros. They were just a lot of fun to collect. Number 1 for me is Gaim, though, with the lock seeds. Again, a little biased with this one because I do love Gaim so much, but I thought this was just a fun gimmick. You know, kind of took some of the stuff you do like from stuff like the Gaia Memories with the different sounds and stuff. I think the Legend Rider ones had kind of demo sounds too, if I remember right, for like you got the Legend Rider for like Kabuto or whatever, would have an array of sounds from that. But just even the regular ones, it's just such a fun, completely like toku idea of combining fruit with a lock seed, and it's somehow silly and ridiculous, but kind of cool at the same time. It had one of my favorite voices. I love the jingles for them. I love the simple creativity of it, slicing off the front of it to like unfold the design and the character. It's, you know what I mean, like the little art on there. It was just a really fun gimmick to collect, and really unique, and just like kind of almost quintessential toku with its weirdness that somehow worked. And another one where it was fun to collect the main ones as well as the Legend Rider ones. But that is just my list. Let me know what your favorite rider gimmicks are over the years, and maybe what you'd like to see for rider gimmicks in the future. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring the bell to get notifications for my videos. Dawson Rider, signing out.